that everybody's here. Thanks for coming out on Friday afternoons. I'm Ben Jasnow. I'm one of the collaborators on this project, Ancient Songs, Modern Muses. What I'd like to talk about, what I'd like to do this evening is talk a little bit about Theocritus and his poetry in general terms. And then talk about how the collaboration between John and myself fits within Theocritus' poetic program. The poems of Theocritus, which are known as idylls, are extremely diverse, so it's difficult to make any generalizations about them. But there are two types of idylls that are best known, and the pictures on the wall here all deal with idylls from these two groups. The first and most famous group of idylls are what are known as the bucolics. These poems have to do with people who herd cows, sheep and goats. In fact, you can hear the ancient Greek word for cow embedded, which is bous, embedded in the word bucolic. And generally, the herders in these poems are in love, and they sing songs about the people that they love. But in part because they live way out in the pasture, and they smell like goats and cheese. The herders can't seem to get the girl. The guy. Their love songs tend to be about failing at love. And they sing these songs in a sort of rustic drawl. They don't use the type of Greek that would have been familiar from other great literature, like Homer or Athenian drama. These characters speak with a subdialect of Greek called Doric, and they use a very countrified type of Doric, which has the effect of sounding rustic. Probably the second most famous group of idylls are what are called the Doric mimes. This is just a fancy name for fairly realistic poems about people who speak a dialect of Greek called Doric, and who are from Doric-speaking parts of the world, of the Greek world. Theocritus was also from the Doric region. Theocritus was born on Greek Sicily. He lived and worked there and on another Greek island called Kos, as well as in Alexandria in Egypt, during the first half of the 3rd century BC. Sicily, at least the part that Theocritus was from, was a Doric region, and so was Kos, where he also lived. But what does that mean exactly? Why is that important? Well, to speak in generalities, these Doric places are something of a cultural remove from other regions of the Greek world. The language and the subject matter of these Doric poems of Theocritus makes them really different from other well-known Greek literature. This is not the language or the subject matter of Homer, nor of Greek tragedy. Everybody knows about the literature of the golden age of Athens, Sophocles, Plato, and Thucydides. Well, the Doric idylls of Theocritus are not that. He doesn't write in that language. He doesn't use those characters. So Theocritus puts himself in opposition to the literary giants of the past. But he's also in opposition to the dominant culture of his own time. The lingua franca of Alexandria, the cultural center of Theocritus' day, was very different from the countrified version of Doric Greek that Theocritus uses in his idylls. So these poems were marked as special. They were culturally different and against the grain, and they were exotic. And they tend to deal with exotic characters. Besides the singing shepherds and cowherds, the idylls also depict lovelorn witches, one-eyed ogres, and strange rustic deities like Pan and Priapus, the Hithyphallic god of sexuality. Several of these characters also have a close cultural connection to the Doric regions of Greece. So when Theocritus writes about local characters speaking a form of Greek akin to Sicilian Greek, his native Sicily, he seems to be asking what it means to be from a subculture in a world that is increasingly cosmopolitan. What does it mean to write in the shadow of a cultural center that is markedly different from your own culture? What does it mean to write in the shadow of a literary canon? Who makes culture? How is it defined and maintained? These are huge questions. But something else that's really interesting about Theocritus is the scale on which his poems are written. His poems address these enormous cultural issues, but most of the time, the scenes dramatized in these poems themselves consist of small, person-to-person interactions. Here's a typical scenario from the bucolic idyls. Two shepherds, sometimes friends, sometimes enemies, sometimes strangers, happen to meet in a deserted pasture. They have a mutual desire to sing. So they find themselves a shady spot beside a spring where they can exchange their songs in comfort. And then they have a singing match. It could be a model of the universe. Two lonely souls meet in the wilderness with little but their songs to trade. These are poems that dramatize the genesis and preservation of regional culture, but not by means of great literary works, grand literary works, but through person-to-person exchange of ostensibly modest songs. And that's one thing that makes an artistic collaboration like the one that John and I are involved in so appropriate to Theocritus' poetry. I like to think that Theocritus would have recognized our collaboration as a partnership very much in the spirit of the Ills. That he would have looked upon it as a real-world act of akin to the artistic exchanges he depicts in his poetry. Because artistic exchange is an obsession for this poet. Let me give you an example. Idyll 6 is about the Cyclops Polyphemus, whom you probably know from Homer's Odyssey, where he's a brutal, one-eyed, man-eating monster. Polyphemus, like Theocritus, is from Sicily, and one point of this idyll, Idyll 6, in my view, is to offer a Sicilian portrait of the Cyclops that contrasts with the famous Homeric depiction. Instead of a brutal man-eater, Theocritus depicts Polyphemus as a sulking, pitiful lover, desperate for the attention of a sea nymph named Galatea. So this idyll offers a good example of Theocritus' interest in local lore. But on another level, Idyll 6 is about artistic or poetic exchange. That is to say, one of the subjects of this poem is poetic exchange itself. The two shepherds in the idyll, named Damoitas and Daphnis, each sing a song about the Cyclops. And the idyll dramatizes this act of mutual creation. But there's another level as well. Idyll 6 is also composed as a letter from Theocritus to his friend Aratus, another poet. So the poem is not only about the fictional song exchange between the two herders, Damoitas and Daphnis, it is about the ostensibly non-fictional song exchange between Theocritus and his friend. I'm going to read my translation of this poem, but one thing I think is really interesting to notice about it, and this is a constant theme in the poetry of Theocritus, is that the songs which are exchanged are about erotic conflict, and they have a strong undercurrent of sexuality and of loneliness. But these songs about despair and conflict have a positive result for the singers. The song exchange takes place in a pleasant pastoral setting, and by trading songs, Damoitas and Daphnis, and by extension, Theocritus and Aratus, strengthen their friendship. There is then a pleasant tension between the subject of the songs, which is erotic conflict, and the friendship and pleasure that comes about for the singers as a result of the song exchange. And incidentally, I think that John's images for this idyll have done a really great job of capturing this tension. Some of the images are serene, while others are blatantly and humorously sexualized, and both tones are appropriate to the poem, which on the one hand is about the peace and harmony of a pastoral scene in which two friends exchange songs. But on the other hand, the songs that the two friends sing are, in the end, about a giant, one-eyed ogre trying to have sex with a mermaid. So here's Idyll 6, which begins in the voice of Theocritus. So it starts out in the voice of Theocritus, speaking to his friend Aratus, and then switches to portray the voices of two cowherds. The first, Daphnis, and then Damoitas. And Damoitas sings in the guise of Polyphemus. He sings as if he were Polyphemus. The first song mocks Polyphemus for not noticing that the sea nymph Galatea is flirting with him. The second song, which is from Polyphemus' own point of view, in the second song, the Cyclops informs us that in fact he did notice Galatea's flirtations, but he's pretending to ignore the nymph to make her jealous. Let me mention too that throwing an apple at somebody is a sign that you love them. So this is Idyll 6. Damoitas and Daphnis sing the Cyclops. Damoitas and Daphnis once, Aratus, gathered their herds together in a single spot. The one of these boys still had golden hair. The other already had half a beard. These two sat near a certain spring, the both of them, on a summer noon, and this is what they sang. Daphnis went first, since he first made the challenge. The Song of Daphnis. Galatea is slinging apples at your sheep, Polyphemus, and taunting, never will you learn to love a girl, just stick to goat herding. And you, poor Cyclops, never look her way, just sitting and piping that sweet song. And now she's pelting the bitch who looks after your flocks. She barks and looks into the ocean, and the lovely waters show the dog's reflection racing up and down the softly breaking shore. Careful, Polyphemus, or the bitch will sick Galatea as she's coming from the water and tear up the lovely skin of her ankles. But she'll just flirt from there, Galatea, just like the lightest threads of thistledown when summer's fair and parching. She flies from the one who loves and chases the one who doesn't, desperate to make a move. For in love, Polyphemus, very often, when fair seems fine, it isn't. Then Damoitas piped a prelude, and this is what he sang. The song of Damoitas, singing as Polyphemus. I swear to Pan I saw her throwing apples at my sheep. It didn't escape me, nor my one sweet eye, which I pray will see to the end. And may Telemus, that seer who makes such baleful pronouncements, bring bale on his own house. He can keep it for his children. Now I'm the one who's teasing Galatea. I never look her way. I say, I have a woman already. And when she hears that, my God, she gets so jealous that she melts. She goes crazy, peeping up from the sea, looking at my cave and at my sheep. It was me who sicked my dog to howl, since, when I was in love, she whined with her snout on her haunches. And maybe, when Galatea sees me doing these things so often, she'll send me a message. If not, my door is locked until she agrees to make her beautiful bed with me here on my island. Because my face isn't nearly as ugly as they say. Just yesterday, when it was calm, I looked into the ocean, and there, in that reflection, my beard was beautiful, and my one eye was beautiful, at least if I'm the judge. And the gleam of these teeth was brighter than Parian marble. To block the evil eye, I spat on my breast 3 times. It was the old witch Cotataris who taught me that. When he'd said this much, Damoitas gave a kiss to Daphnis, and the one gave his syrinx to the other, and the other gave his lovely flute. Now Damoitas played the flute, and Daphnis the netherd piped on the syrinx. And straightway the heifers began to dance in the tender grass. Victory belonged to neither man, but both went unbeaten. In this singing match from Idyll 6, neither man wins, because both are unbeatable. The two shepherds exchange gifts as a sign of their equality. The mutual admiration of these two singers for one another symbolizes, by extension, the mutual admiration of Theocritus and his correspondent, Aratus. It is an emblem of the connections created by artistic exchange, and this is one reason that a collaborative project is so appropriate to Theocritus' Idylls. This scenario of artistic exchange appears over and over again in the Idylls. I'll give you one more example. The setting of Idyll 1 is much the same as that of Idyll 6. A goatherd and a shepherd find themselves together in a deserted mountain pasture. It is noon, a good time to take a rest in the shade. So they find themselves a lovely spot where the pines whisper and a stream slips over the stones. The unnamed goatherd would like to hear a song, and in exchange for hearing it, he offers the shepherd a marvelously decorated wooden cup, along with the chance to milk a particular goat. So this cup is a beautiful item depicting the various types of labor that men undergo. And in return for the cup and the chance to milk the goat, the shepherd, named Thyrsis, sings a song about Daphnis, a figure from Sicilian folklore and popular religion, who dies from love, and who may or may not be the same Daphnis as in the last poem. Here again, two people trade creative works about toil and conflict, yet the results of this artistic exchange are paradoxically pleasant. The images of suffering and toil depicted in the works of art traded by the herders contrast sharply not only with the leisurely setting in which the pastors find themselves, but also with the friendship and mutual admiration that results from the exchange. Idyll 1 has many layers. Part of the point of the poem is to explore Sicilian culture. A large portion of Idyll 1 depicts the final lamentation and death of Daphnis, a cowherder drawn from local Sicilian legends, who supposedly invented bucolic poetry. The same style of pastoral poetry that Idyll 1 is written in, and a style that came to be associated with Sicily in particular. So the dramatization of Daphnis' death and his song of lamentation is also a dramatization of Sicilian bucolic poetry itself. Idyll 1 is a poem by a Sicilian poet about a Sicilian shepherd who sings about a legendary Sicilian cowherder who was supposedly the first singer of this Sicilian style of poetry. But another function of Idyll 1 is to reflect on the nature of artistic exchange. Part of the drama of the poem again consists in the trade of one work of art for another. A cup decorated with strange and mysterious images in return for a strange and marvelous song. I think that that exchange is an especially good image for the collaboration between John and myself. One person gives a series of images, and the other gives poetry. So I'll leave you with a couple of excerpts from Idyll 1, the first of which comes from the description of this decorated wooden cup. And then later you can see John's interpretation of this cup in his wonderful rendering of some of its scenes. Description of the cup. And there a woman like a wonder of the gods is crafted, adorned with a robe and a fillet. Two men crowd round, lovely themselves with their long hair, each with the other, they quarrel with words. But she pays them no mind. Now laughing, she glances at one of the men. Now again her will flits in another direction. But they labor in vain a long time with swollen eyes for love. Alongside these, a fisherman is crafted, and a rough rock where he's standing, looking lively. The old fisher's hauling in his huge net for a cast, He looks just like a man working hard. You'll say he's fishing with all the strength of his limbs. All the muscles of his neck are straining, even if his hair is gray. He's got a young strength. Just a bit further on from the old sea-beaten man is a beautiful vineyard, weighed down with bunches of dark grapes. And a small boy sits on a wall of dry rocks, keeping watch. But a couple of foxes get right past. The one creeps through rows, plotting mischief for the fresh fruit. The other's using all her craft to get at the boy's satchel and says she won't let up until she gets to breakfast on his biscuits. But the boy, meanwhile, crafts a lovely cricket cage, weaving asphodel with rushes. He has no care for his satchel, nor do the vines concern him, not nearly so much as he rejoices in his weaving. And curling acanthus spreads over the chalice in every direction, a goatherd's marvel, a wonder to bewilder your heart. I gave a goat to a Caledonian ferryman for it, and I paid him a big, white, milky cheese besides. So that's a description of the cup. The unnamed goatherd will trade this strange vessel to the shepherd Thyrsis in exchange for a song about the sufferings of Daphnis. The song that Thyrsis sings recounts Daphnis' struggles with love, which eventually kill her. The part of the song I'll be reading is an impersonation of Daphnis, as he laments and bids farewell to the landscape of Sicily and to his chief activities of singing and herding. His lament is punctuated by a refrain, followed by one final dialogue between the two herders, discussing the terms of their exchange. One note, Kypris, who is mentioned here, is another name for Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and you'll hear a lot of place names, most of which are Sicilian. Begin again, muses, my muses bring, begin the song the herders sing. Farewell, O wolves, O jackals, farewell, O bears who are lurking in the mountains. I, Daphnis, no longer a nethered in your woods, no longer in your glades or in your coppice. Arethusa, farewell, and the beautiful waters of the rivers pouring from the Thibris. Begin again, muses, my muses bring, begin the song the herders sing. Daphnis am I, who in this place puts out his cows to pasture. Daphnis am I, who in this place waters his bulls and his heifers. Begin again, muses, my muses bring, begin the song the herders sing. O Pan, Pan, if on lofty Lycaeus, if you haunt enormous Minalis, now come to the island of Sicily, leave the Helicate headland, and leave the steep barrow of Lycon's son, grave that's a wonder to the gods. Bring an end, muses, my muses bring an end to the song the herders sing. Take my pipe, my lord, well bound about its lip that smells like honey from the wax, for I am lost at the hands of love, drawn already into Hades. Bring an end, muses, my muses bring an end to the song the herders sing. Now the brambles, may you blossom with violets, and blossom with violets the acanthus. The juniper grow lovely with locks of narcissus, each thing become another. Let the pine bear pears since Daphnis dies, let the hart now rend the hound. Let the wide-eyed owls sing down from the mountains and drown out the nightingales. Bring an end, muses, my muses bring an end to the song the herders sing. He said so much and stopped, and Kypris wished to raise him back up, but the flax of the fates had spun too far, and Daphnis went into the flood. The eddies washed over the friend of the muses, whom the nymphs had never detested. Bring an end, muses, my muses bring an end to the song the herders sing. Now give me the goat in the pail, so I can milk her and pour her to the muses. Farewell, ye muses, 1,000 times farewell. For you I'll ever sing another hour, a sweeter song. And then the goatherd says, full of honey be your lovely mouth, my Thyrsis, and full of honeycomb too. May you eat a sweet fig from a Gilead, since you sing better than any cicada. Here's your chalice. See how beautifully it smells, my friend. You'd think the hours had filled it at their spring. Cassytha, come here. Go on and milk her. But you, Miss Goat, had better not strut, or that billy will get right up. By writing about the legendary Sicilian singer Daphnis, Theocritus is clearly meditating on the significance of his native Sicilian culture. But he's also reflecting about the paradoxical pleasures of art. Listening to the descriptions of human toil is, paradoxically, very pleasant, and the exchange of the two works engenders a friendship between the two herds. And we'll be around to answer questions, so feel free to ask about any of the poetry or pictures, and thank you for listening. Thank you.